This segment, I want to talk a little bit more specifically to Google smartphones, tactical usage, and bug out kits and stuff like that, backup communications. A lot of people are using smartphones these days. I would say it's probably the most common and popular type of phone on the market. The other thing that we've learned from the revelations of Edward Snowden is that spy agencies have their fingers very deeply into this stuff. Several spy agencies have their fingers very deeply all the way into the development stage of the firmware that's used on most modern cell phone systems, to the point that you cannot consider them secure from government snooping. However, I think that if you practice some prudent security measures and communication protocols, you can do a lot which will help make your communications secure from hostile non-government entities and, let's say, lower grade government entities and corrupt individuals who may have some limited access to government grade spy resources, but they're having to call in favors to do that. And if you practice more diligent communication safety and protocols for personal security, that because they would have to call in bigger favors with more connected people, which puts them at risk, you may still enjoy better levels of personal communication safety than you would have if you don't put those types of practices into place. So that gets us to the subject of Google phones, which are based on a more or less open source firmware and quickly becoming the industry standard, as opposed to Apple, which is also based on a lot of the same firmware. But as we all know, any information you give to Apple, you may actually not just be giving to the government, but you're giving to multiple hostile parties, including debt collectors, private investigators, and other people who would have access to the Apple system. You may also be giving that information to marketers. Now, would those types of organizations and users have access to your Google data? Of course they would. And we also have to look at the fact that one of the things that you will need to learn to practice is compartmentalizing your contacts. Fortunately, further developments in Google software are set up to help you do just that, which is to compartmentalize your contacts. Some of the things I've been finding in the software on this particular Google phone, which is kind of a survivor paramilitary green version. They also have one in some of the what I would call the Bear Grylls colors, that yellow, orange, or DeWalt colors of construction site tools. Is that there are things in your settings which you can control, at least from the way that you're going to interface with a phone. Now, whether or not a hostile party can hack into this phone and do ghost controls on your settings, you have to assume that it's possible. And that gets you into some protocols as far as how you want to safely interact with your phone. But a lot of what you could do is you can control some of your profiles and things here with, let's see, go into another setting. But there's other settings in here that I've been finding. You can turn GPS on and off. You can control some levels of security here by simply not filling out the owner information. You can lock the SIM card separately from the other memory in the phone. You can do a lot of device administration. Let's say somebody gets a hold of your phone, they stole it, they found it, or something to that degree. There's a lot you could do. You can also put in GPS type stuff so that if your phone is lost or stolen, you may be able to track its location. All of those options are going to be available to you with a more open market sourced Google phone. The other thing is that if you purchase these through third-party sellers, especially large online sellers, And there is a growing secondary market in people that will buy these from the large online sellers and make them available locally, flea markets, Craigslist, local cash markets. They can make these things available for cash, which means it's also possible to set these up with a pay-as-you-go SIM card that's not necessarily registered in your name or was only registered with a person who originally bought it, and then you pay cash to continue it, or you don't register it with a SIM card at all. You simply use it with Wi-Fi. For example, this one's capable of working with Skype and Wi-Fi and being a fully functional phone as long as it's got a Wi-Fi access. There's a lot of firmware upgrades which can even get this into some semi-secure Wi-Fi systems, but not highly secure Wi-Fi systems. The micro SD and a charging system for, survivor purposes. I've got the European plug here. I've also got some US plugs. The cool thing about having the external battery bank and a solar power is that it can make it unnecessary to have to carry some of these other plugs. And with relatively standardized USB getting installed in a lot of vehicles, a lot of airport lounges, airplanes, things like that, you may be able to get away with just carrying the USB plug. And of course, if you have or use a laptop or something like that, again, I can get you a little bit into a security issue in that if you want to compartmentalize and sterilize your contacts with this phone, I would suggest you not plug it into a laptop that you use on a regular basis, which would have critical personal accounts on it. Reason being is that the firmware on these and the apps self-update a lot, and they can get hostile malware on them or spyware. And under those types of circumstances, you want to be able to control what data they would get. And the only way you can really do that is to compartmentalize it to the point that reduces damage if a particular device is compromised. That's one of the reasons as Apple devices can be compromised by the government, it's much more difficult for third-party users to compromise those because the Apple Corporation is somewhat responsible for the security of the data. When you talk about open source type Android software, you run into a situation, no single party is really responsible for your data, which means that if a criminal party gets into that stuff, you're kind of fucked. There's not a lot you do. You fill out a report, maybe. If you're entirely innocent in the matter, you fill out a report, you submit it, and maybe you get somewhere on that. The other thing I really like on this, in picking a ruggedized phone for the go bag purposes, is I have the little solar charger, battery bank type thing. We can keep it charged. We don't necessarily have to plug in anywhere to keep it recharged. In managing your SIM cards, there are SIM card wallets, which not particularly popular in the United States, but one of the big advantages of using foreign market cell phones is there's usually more than one SIM card slot inside the phone. They can take as many as 4. This particular one takes 2, but there are small differences in the SIM cards which will make some systems compatible with some of the slots in a phone and not others. For example, the T-Mobile SIM card on this will only work in slot 2. If you put a T-Mobile card in slot 1, the phone freaks out. Starts flashing a bunch of Chinese stuff on the screen, running through self-diagnostics. I don't know what that's about. I thought I had a bad phone when I did that. I took the SIM card out, I put it in the other slot, it seemed to work fine. You have expandable memory, which also means that you have removable memory. And that's another big advantage I'm noticing with these foreign market phones, that if you want to make your data or your communication a little bit more secure, and you don't fully trust the user settings on the inside, which would, let's say, disable a SIM card or disable a network or disable Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, you can simply open the case and remove the battery, and that will shut the phone off. You obviously can't do that with Apple phones, which are tethered to your Apple identity. It's also very difficult to set up an identity that's specific to the phone using the Apple stuff. You pretty much somebody's going to figure out that it's you. You're the author of whatever's, likely to be coming off of that Apple phone. On one of these, you do have a level of deniable authorship in that you can actually open a new Google account using a phone so that the phone is specific to that. A Google account would be specific to that phone or a group of those phones. So that's one of the services that a third-party seller, the flea market, the Craigslist, the cash market type guy, can have a phone that, let's say, was activated with SIM cards that were just activated by the seller, and that's as far as that resource would go in identifying the end user. And then the phone itself was used to activate new email and Gmail and Google Plus accounts that were activated to that specific phone, and that makes it more compartmentalized communication. That pretty much can only be accomplished readily with the foreign sourced phones. The phones sold in the US market are not as capable of being able to do that. And then there are some countries, such as Costa Rica, where they have phone registrations and things, a very police state in that method. Having a multiple SIM card phone is one of the ways that the locals kind of deal with those things. And if you travel internationally, a multiple SIM card phone is practically a necessity. You may be traveling in a border area between two countries where as soon as you leave one set of cell towers, you're in range of another, where they work on a slightly different system, and they're not compatible with each other, and they're not going to give you roaming access. And without taking your phone apart to change cards all the time and then missing calls from the other one, or remembering that you need to change SIM cards every time you cross a particular bridge or border checkpoint, that can be a hassle. And for a lot of normal, appropriate business usage, everybody's kind of figured out under those circumstances, they just want to be able to stick multiple SIM cards in a phone and have it automatically kind of switch between which ones it uses depending on where you're located.